This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals, Evan Grant, and for the last time, David Moore, who is not only exiting this podcast, he is exiting the Dallas Morning News of his own volition, which is a triumph.
Yeah, I was going to say, you sound surprised by that.
David, if you could go out on your own 2 feet these days, it is a remarkable accomplishment.
Well, I was going to say it is better to ride into the sunset before you're shot off the horse. So
I think I saw that in a Western or two. In all seriousness, this is a sad day for Evan and I. When we started this podcast 10 years ago.
Well, for you, Evan gets more audio time, so I think he's fine with it.
He likes that part. But we started this podcast 10 years ago with me and Evan and Barry Horn, and then after Barry moved on to the life of retirement, now we picked up David, and now we've outlasted David too. I'm not sure what this means. I know that I'm older than David, not a lot older. That has been an old joke on this podcast. Just because he looks a lot younger doesn't mean that he is actually a lot younger. But David has been a remarkable teammate. I have always regarded the Dallas Morning News and SportsDay as a great team. It has been the greatest privilege of my career to work here and to have teammates like David, who has been here most of the time that I've been here, except for a couple of dalliances in other places. And he's done a remarkable job covering whatever he's done, whether it's been the Mavericks or the NBA, or obviously covering the Cowboys now for, I guess, how long has that been, David, that you've been on the Cowboys beat?
It's been a minute. It's this is my third tour of duty on the Cowboys. Probably this time's been 15 years.
That sounds right. And then, so altogether, how many years have you covered the Cowboys?
Well, I've been at the Morning News for 32 years. So I guess it's 19 years of day-to-day coverage of the Cowboys. I'll take it back. It's 20 years of day-to-day coverage of the Cowboys. And even in those years when it wasn't day-to-day coverage, I was part of the playoff team back when they were going beyond the divisional round of the playoffs. And they hung around for a bit longer in January and February than they seem to now.
Yeah. David, go over with us your journey. I know that you went to school at North Texas, and then after you got out of there, what did you do?
Went to North Texas. The first job I had out of there was at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, covering TCU football and Southwest Conference basketball, which is where you and I first crossed paths, because with those Houston teams that went to the Final Four in back-to-back years.
Yes, sir.
In fact, I was thinking about the other day, there was the Final Four in Albuquerque between Houston and Louisville, when Clyde Drexler actually jumped over a guy who was trying to take a charge for a dunk, and then the way Houston lost that game. And I still remember, it's like, wow, what a crushing defeat, and they're not going to do this. And then I'm standing on the loading dock, and Akeem Olajuwon's walking out. He looks over, sees me, and says, "Stay cool, man."
And you know what, David? You have stayed cool. 32 years. My God, listen, I mean, to have covered the Cowboys for 20 years, and as the newspaper and the business has evolved to this, nonstop eruption of copy, what you've done is just been remarkable, and you've kind of been the beacon for how we cover beats. So I'm going to miss you, because you've kind of been a guiding light for me on that, and I won't miss you on this podcast because I will get more time. But it's always great in this business these days when somebody can have had a great long career and ride off into the sunset on their own and of their own volition.
Well, Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it. And it's just, I never knew when I would retire, but I always knew I wanted to go out with people saying, well, you could still do it another year or two, versus people saying, why didn't he leave a year or two ago? And, just Evan, what you were saying, just doing a beat now is just so all consuming, so intrusive on your personal life, and interferes with plans you've had, and if it's big enough, those plans are out the window, right? And just over time, that wears on you a little bit more, and I still feel I had the energy to do all that, but I could see soon in the future going, well, I don't know if I want to do this or that, and then that's not fair to the other person on the staff who's going to have to absorb it, right? So it has changed. It's a true 24/7 now. Players are breaking their own news at all hours of the night, often when they're out drinking or in a club, which is not always the best way to release information. But so yeah, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Feel good about things. Feel good about certainly the morning news, and as I say, it's undoubtedly, like I said, 32 years here, more than 40 total in the business, about 44. But my 32 years here have been the most professionally fulfilling of my professional life.
Well, let me just say this about going out on top. David finished in the top 10 APSC nationally with two different stories that he did last year. One about Mike Zimmer, and then another one about Jerry Jones Doodles, which, that tells you something right there, that
Jerry Jones
Doodles. Let's not be juvenile here. Wow. We were doing so well on this send-off.
See where this is going to go when I'm gone. He's taking.
I told you I was having problems hearing you guys this morning.
Oh my gosh. He also just won first place in Texas APME for his story about Mike Zimmer. So not that contests mean everything. As I always said, when you win a reward, it's great. When you don't, it doesn't mean anything. But exactly. It is an awfully good way to go out. And so
spoken like a bitter loser,
a very bitter loser, as a matter of fact. But I do appreciate all that David has done for us here. Like I said, it's, it is a team. SportsDay is a team, and everybody wants to have good teammates. It's no different from the Rangers, Stars, Mavericks, Cowboys. You want to have good teammates around you, people you can count on, and we could always do that with David. So we appreciate it, David. And so before we devolve into a sobbing mess here, we would like to go ahead and start our actual podcast. So we're going to talk about the Cowboys and what they did last weekend. David, I don't know that any of us had Tyler Booker.
Talk amongst yourselves. I'm a little bit verklempt at the moment.
Yeah, I like that.
Just coffee talk.
Yeah.
Coffee.
So, I mean, Tyler Booker, I did not have that on my bingo card. So tell us a little bit how you think that came about.
Well, I started hearing his name early in the week. I was guilty, as many others. Fans talk about just the, I think a lot of fans were fixated or obsessed on, well, this team's going to have to get a running back and a wide receiver. They need to address both, but if not both, at least one in the first 2 days of the draft. I don't think it was just fans. I believe most media bought into that rationale as well. And when I started hearing Booker's name, it was like, well, I guess I can see a scenario if they move back a few spots where he's in play, and I think that's why his name is going out there. But when you looked at the guards, they signed 3 interior offensive linemen in free agency in the offseason. They had a handful here already. It just didn't seem to me that would be the pick at 12. Would it be the pick if they move back to 16, 17? I thought it would be in play then, but then you would have picked up a 3rd-round pick probably, and you go from there. So I didn't envision him as a serious candidate at 12. I was obviously off on that. They did.
Let me ask you this, David.
And I will say this, McMillan, if McMillan would have been on the board, they would have taken McMillan. That
Well,
was
that's what I
the
was going to ask you.
receiver. Yeah, that
So
was the receiver
still,
they wanted. But then when McMillan left, I think a lot of people went, well, if they don't get McMillan at 12, they'll be happy with Golden. Well, Booker was right ahead of Golden on their board, so they went, let's stay true to the board here and let's go, let's take him.
that's interesting to me because Teteroa McMillan went 8, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And so they did have him over him on their board.
Yes.
You know, in my mind, I had a hard time deciding between McMillan and Golden. I think I actually would have gone with Golden, Matthew Golden, the 4.29 speedster from Texas, simply because of the speed element. You know, the Cowboys don't have that. They don't have a real burner at receiver. And this was a guy who, for Texas and for Quinn Ewers, was a big play guy, and not really on throwing him, sending him deep like they did with Xavier Worthy, but really working underneath routes and just making first down catches and making clutch plays for him. And I really thought that, because of all of that, I might like him better than McMillan, but obviously they didn't.
No.
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Evan.
I wanted to ask you guys, because I was otherwise involved. It surprised me, and I know that our 4 experts all had different picks, none of whom were Booker. I don't know that there was a draft analyst out there that had Booker.
Not at 12.
Peter Sprague did for ESPN. That was the one name I saw. Was he in his last minute mock draft? He had that
Right at
and
the
I
end.
was just when I saw it, I thought, oh no, there's no way. And
all right, so
right.
In a vacuum for a minute, because we're going to talk about the rest of the draft, but in a vacuum for a minute, do you guys agree with the pick?
No, I didn't agree with it because I felt like, just what David said, that's 12 is pretty high to take a guard. Now they took Zach Martin with the 12th pick. So or with the 16th pick.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But in that range, a little farther
in
back.
that range. So it was high for me to do that. I think they should have dropped back and traded down and picked up an extra pick to do that. But then now, David, I'll need to ask you this, because Calvin Watkins was telling me the other day that when I was out there that Jerry said that they had Booker rated like 7th or 8th on their board.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, it is. Jerry said that, and Steven said that. So that is where he sat. So, but McMillan was ahead of him as well. Now, whether McMillan was a 5, 6, or if the 7 and 8 was like McMillan and Booker, unsure. But McMillan was ahead of them, and they would have taken McMillan over Booker. But clearly, no one else, that was there at the time was ahead of Booker on their board.
Yeah, that it was a little confusing. I will say this, if you're getting a guy, this is what Rick Gosselin used to always say, in the first round, if you take a guy and he ends up being a Pro Bowl player, well, then you did good. Didn't matter when you took him, you did good. So I also think there is a point where you have to play the game, right? And the game says that most people probably were not going to take Tyler Booker with the 13th or 14th or 15th pick. Now, there was another guard that went at 19, and I guess it's possible that they could have taken him instead of, and so he would have been off the board. But, and it's also possible that they attempted to do that and nobody wanted to move up, right?
Sure. Well, I think they explored moving back a few spots, and they were talking to Houston. Houston was one of the teams they were talking to on the clock about moving back, but Houston's primary interest in return was giving a future pick, and Dallas wanted to come out of this draft with more capital, so that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at the because we
very quickly on that. I looked today. There are 17 offensive linemen on the Cowboys roster. I don't ever remember that many offensive linemen at any point in an offseason on the Cowboys roster. So they certainly, they've missed a lot of games there with injuries, declining play on some star players in recent years, I think, has also caught up with them. So they're certainly throwing numbers at it. One other thing I will say about Booker, he was as impressive in his introductory interview as just about anyone I have seen in my time there. He was, he clearly is an alpha leader, but he's very thoughtful about it, very smart. And I was talking to people in the organization, and I said, when was the last rookie you had come in that you had this feel about how this guy just gets it. He's going to be a great presence in the room. And you heard Jerry Jones talk about Michael Irvin and what he did when he was here. The other name I got was Jason Witten. So they are floored by this guy and his leadership potential, which was a big thing that Brian Schottenheimer wanted to do. You know, it kind of to me, it harkens back to Jason Garrett's first draft here when I was talking about getting the right kind of guys, and they went out and drafted all these guys that were team captains. Look at how many team captains the Cowboys took in this draft. So I think Schottenheimer is following that blueprint pretty closely.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me too is when Will McClay said that they had a very similar grade on Tyler Booker to the one that they gave Zach Martin.
Yeah, that was eye-opening as well. And you know, he's not. The thing about Booker is he's not particularly athletic for that position, but he's strong. He's a mauler. His technique is good. He gets after people. And he's good in the room. So, I mean, those are all the qualities that, you know, I don't get overly concerned whether or not an interior offensive lineman is overly athletic, because I think there's a lot more to playing that position than being athletic. And
if you were athletic, you'd be playing tackle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, or, you know, tight end, whatever. So yeah, the knock of, and I remember that when, you know, Travis Frederick, when they took him, they moved back and took Travis Frederick back in the early teens. And it was like, well, why do him? You know, he had a horrible 40 time. My response was, how often do you see a center run a 40? You know, you just don't. No, that's not, you know, there are things to compare metrics to look at what he can do, but a 40 time on a center isn't one of them.
No, that's right. Absolutely. All right, let's look at a couple of the other picks that they made there, because you know they go into the second round, and I never got a pronunciation for Donovan's last name. Did we get the defensive end from Boston College?
Yeah. Let me.
Izaraku, is that possible?
Izaraku, yeah, it is Izaraku. Yeah.
Okay, Izaraku. Okay. Mm-hmm. And who had, like, I think 16 and a half sacks for Boston College last year. His numbers were very similar to Abdul Carter's of Penn State, of course, who went, you know, very high in the draft. Now that's a different conference, but the ACC is not a bad conference either. And certainly there was a lot of feeling that was a great pick. I know John Oettinger was a draft analyst who used to work for SportsDay. And he was gaga about that pick. Loved that pick there, and also like the Siobhan Ravel pick too in the third round. All of those guys at one point,
both of those guys, for a value of where they were taken, was outstanding value for the Cowboys, and really down on the third day too. They did that. Overall, while this draft didn't address what we considered to be positions of need, and I would argue are still positions of need, as far as value over investment, Dallas ranked one of the higher teams in the league in that department.
Yes, I think at one time, before Ravel got hurt his senior year there in East Carolina, there were some people that felt like he could have been a top 15 pick.
Yeah, he was hurt early in the year in September, and he's coming off that ACL. But, you know, actually, this was interesting too. When asked about his timetable, he should actually be cleared ahead of Trayvon Diggs as far as being able to do some things for them. So, still a guy coming off a major injury. You hate to say that he's going to step in right away and potentially start for them, but you know, I think there's a chance he'll be in the competition with Elam there early until Trayvon Diggs gets back, with Deron Bland holding down the other starting corner spot.
I think if he's just in the mix, is good enough.
Oh, he'll be in the mix, yeah.
Yeah, then that would be good enough. So look, they got themselves a pretty good pass. These were all needs, right?
Sure.
And I wrote that going into
they're all upgrades. They're all upgrades.
Yes, you needed a cornerback. You probably needed another offensive lineman. There's a debate on what they really needed in the offensive line. It might have been a tackle if you don't believe in Tyler.
You can argue that.
They apparently do believe in him. So it's just that the biggest need was probably wide receiver and running back. But to deal with that running back, there were a lot of guys available. Now, so they didn't have the 4th round pick. David, did you have an idea that I was certain they were going to trade up into the 4th round to try to get themselves a back then? Did
Well,
you
they
have
tried.
any
They
idea?
tried. Couldn't get it done. And in this draft, because again, they could have given a future 4 to do it, but then what? You're like 3 years in a row, you're shuffling the 4th round pick or dropping
Right.
out of, and this this unfolded very similar to last year, right? When you knew there was going to be a run at the running back position early in the 4th. The Cowboys didn't have a 4th round pick. They knew that run was about to come, but they sat there and took Marish Leofau, linebacker, who had a very, very good rookie season. I think is going to be a part of this thing going forward in a big way. But they decided to go linebacker there over running back, knowing they probably sacrificed their chance at running back. You look at the 4th round this year, the 2 positions you just mentioned, running back and wide receiver, there were a total of 13, I believe it was 6 running backs and 7 receivers were taken in the 4th round. So that was the round where they could have addressed it, and they didn't have a 4th round pick because of Jonathan Mingo.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see if that works out. I don't feel good about that situation myself.
Now, their argument was Mingo was better than any receiver they would have gotten in the 4th this year. We'll see.
Yeah. Evan, you're on mute.
You're muted, Evan.
I read John Oettinger's reports, and he was really high on the Cowboys' 2nd and 3rd round picks, as you guys said. And I think that for him, in his grade of the Cowboys, which I think he gave him an A-, I think that pulled up the grade because he considered Booker a stretch in the 1st round. And so that's why I asked the question about in a vacuum. I think the 2 questions I still have are, I don't get how a team, and David, you answered some of this with the numbers in the 4th round, but I don't get how a team is considering a wide receiver at the number 12 overall pick because it's a pressing need, ends up not taking a receiver in the draft, period. That seems like a real miss for me there.
Yeah.
And the other question
I
I had was there any discussion, what we had discussed this last week a little bit, we had talked about Jalen Walker. Was there any discussion from the Cowboys about Walker once he started to drop?
Little discussion, but again, they had Booker rated ahead of him. As for receiver, I think that speaks to, well, this was a very deep running back class, which is why they feel good about who they got in the 5th round, better than Kevin does, based on what I've read in Jadon Blue. This was not a particularly good or deep wide receiver class. And after you got by those top 4 receivers, I think there was, you really, it's a pretty big drop down to the next plateau. And is that guy better than Jonathan Mingo? In their estimation or rationalization, no. But it certainly wasn't good enough to where, I think they were caught. McMillan was clearly the only receiver they had who they felt was worthy of a top 12 pick. And then after him, they knew those next 3 weren't going to get to him at 44. Burden came fairly close, but I never got the sense that they were tempted to jump up there and get him. And I think they felt the board was deep enough there that they didn't want to give up any draft capital to move up, because whoever was going to be there at 44, they were completely happy with.
So let's get to that running back pick in the 5th round when they did trade up to get Blue from Texas. I know Will McClay was excited about that because of the speed factor. He runs a 4.38. He's very fast. There's no question about that. It's just that I saw him play quite a bit at Texas, and I think they gave him every opportunity there to seize that job and keep it, and he just couldn't. He fumbled 5 times in only 134 carries.
It's about every 25 touches he's putting it on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah, averaging about 1 a game, if you're going to measure that out. And he not a real good runner inside either. Once he gets in the open, obviously he's gone. And I think that the conundrum of it for me was that if you look at the two playoff games, he carried the ball a total of 8 times in
Yeah.
2 playoff games. Now against Ohio State, he had 2 touchdown catches. 2 catches, or I think he had 4 catches for 59 yards, and 2 of those were touchdowns. To me, I envision that is the role that the Cowboys look at him for, is that he will be that kind of back they can bring in on third down. Of course, the problem there bringing him in on third down is he's not great at pass protection.
And
I
Javonte
think
Williams he's very good at that. But I will say this: if Williams goes down, I think that they feel, well, here's a guy who can we can throw to out of the backfield. He's, in my mind, look, when they didn't take a running back in the first 2 days, they resigned themselves to, we're going to do this by committee again, and it was like, which of these backs gives us something we don't have? Blue with the speed gives them something they don't have. Then they came back with the Clemson back late, just the power guy to run in between the tackles, which I think is a little bit like Sanders. I think Sanders and the Clemson back are similar, and Blue and Javonte Williams are similar. But I think going in, I think Williams is going to be their primary back. But it's and work Blue in there, and then either Sanders or the other draft pick will kind of get it. We'll go from there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to me. I was a little more intrigued by Phil Maffa as a running back, because of his size. He's like 6'1", 235. That's, to me, that's what the Cowboys have really lacked. I've been kind of pounding on them. It's like you have problems down here in your short yardage on the goal line, and yet you're trying to score. It's like when they had Tony Pollard. They're trying to give him the ball at the goal line. It's the last guy would give the ball at the goal line is Tony Pollard. So
Maffa's kind of their shades of Marion Barber, right? I think you always compare it to past players in that model, and I think they see some of Marion Barber in him.
I got to say this: I was really heartbroken to see Cam Scatterbo go to the Giants.
I know you were.
That was my guy, Cam Scatterbo. He would have given you that kind of thing. I will see what kind of career he has, but that was the thing too. The Giants had a good draft, and they had a lot of course, they had a lot of picks, and they had a lot of high picks, and so that's the advantage of being terrible, is that you get an opportunity to really improve yourself. So we'll see.
The advantages of being terrible.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that's going to do it for our Cowboys segment of our podcast. We could keep on talking, but we got a lot of stuff to get to here. So let's talk a little bit about the Rangers and how that slug-in that they were going to do isn't really working out for them, and really neither is anything else offensively. And that has been a little bit of a mess. And the real crime of it is that I can't remember, Evan, when I've seen the starting pitching of the Rangers the first month of the season be better. This has been as impressive a run by their starters as I can recall. And I know that offenses as a whole are not generating a lot in baseball, but still, it has been remarkable what they've done so far, and to kind of squander that somewhat really seems like a crime.
Well, yeah, I mean, the answer to that is yes. The obvious potential solution is if this offense ever gets on track, it does have the ability to, cover up once the pitching staff maybe wears down a little bit. But this certainly seems like a real wasted opportunity to get out to a really hot start. The pitching has been better than expected. The bullpen has been outstanding, and the Rangers they've just not been disciplined at the plate. They have chased too much. We can get into some of those specific numbers, and they've tried to do too much, I think, when they've had runners on base, and so it's created a mess. And Kevin, I think there's also some additional factors here. I think one is you cannot under or overestimate how important Evan Carter was going to be to this lineup, because that was the guy that they counted on to be a potential leadoff option who works every count, who takes lots of pitches. And they haven't had that. And because of that, it's forced them to kind of shuffle around. And we've seen different guys hitting leadoff as Marcus Semien has dropped down, but they're missing they're missing that element of an extra guy who can get on base. And that, at the top of the order, and that puts more pressure. It's meant Corey Seager is hit with nobody on base a lot. It's meant the same for their run producers.
The thing that bothers me the most about all this, Evan, is that, sometimes it just takes guys a little while to get going offensively, to get their swing right, their timing down. Certainly we know that about Marcus Semien, and that's the case with him. But what has been more bothersome than anything is that, the guys they added, Jock Peterson, who obviously had a horrific start, and Jake Berger, whose start hasn't been a lot better. But these were guys that came with, high on base percentages. These were guys that were very discerning at the plate. They weren't striking out a lot. They were taking pitches. They were drawing walks, and none of that has happened. It is one thing not to be hitting, but when you're not having good at bats, that's catastrophic. To me in an offense, because for one thing, as we talked about before, just get on base, because if you've got any wheels at all, and the way the game is structured now and the way the rules are, then you can end up with a double here, because you're going to steal second.
Yeah, I listen, Peterson's just gotten off to a dreadful start. And there's no other way to explain it. He's really struggled to get out of it, though. The last, what went kind of under the radar is last week on that road trip, he did start to hit balls harder and did reach base a little bit more consistently, but he's certainly, this is the worst start of his career. Berger, on the other hand, I mean, we talked about how much he slugs and what he does against the fastball, but it is a guy who struck out 150 times last year, and he only walked 31 times. And so that was the weakness in his game, is he is going to chase a little bit, but he was going to crush right-handers who threw fastballs, and that was this team's most prominent need going into the offseason. As always, when you address something, it's hard to address all of your potential needs. And the absence of Carter opens up the need for other guys to be more disciplined. What bothers me here is, if you go back and look at, we're just talking about being disciplined at the plate, right? Forget about timing for a minute. Forget about approach, all of that. We're talking about just being disciplined at the plate and not chasing pitches out of the zone. And the Rangers have been awful at that this year. They lead Major League Baseball in chase percentage, and it's been their downfall. We can cite almost any game that they've lost, a close, low-scoring game, and pick out one or two at bats that have just absolutely been dreadful. We talked a little bit about this on the pre-show. Sunday, Adolis Garcia follows Jock Peterson's leadoff triple. Garcia swings at a pitch at 1-0. He takes the first pitch, swings at a pitch at 1-0 that was down below the zone. Gets to 2-1, swings at a pitch down below the zone. And then at 2-2, swings at a pitch down below the zone. A 5-pitch strikeout, end of that opportunity. He needed to get the ball in the air there. And none of those pitches that were below the zone were close. They were all in the dirt, and he swung at them. That's a bad at bat. That's a bat without a plan, and it's a bat in which you didn't seem to understand what the primary goal needed to be there.
Yeah, and we know that about Adolis. We also know that Adolis is one of the players who's been a very clutch player historically for them. Certainly he was in 2023 and in the playoffs. And he does come up with the big at bats, but it does speak to the fact that, one of the things we talked about, it's like you almost feel like you have to say to Adolis before he goes to the plate in that situation, hey man, we just need a fly ball here. It's all we need. Don't go crazy. And of course you're not going to do that because he's a big league. Well, you don't want to say anything to him on the way to the plate, but you almost feel like you have to remind him of that. That's just such a squandered opportunity. And that is not only how they've been losing, that's how other teams have been beating them, is that they are doing stuff like that. Of course, the comic play at the end of the game on Sunday where, a swinging bunt and the guy scores on a ball that never got more than 10 feet from the plate. Well, it ended up more than 10 feet from the plate for sure. But that's the thing. If you're putting the ball in play, you can make good things happen. And the Rangers are not doing that. They're not playing. They're just not very good at small ball. We know that.
Well, they're not good at
And
small ball, and they're not good at taking advantage of opportunities when they should have some leverage. It's just it has appeared they've gone to the plate without a plan.
Are they the lowest scoring team in the league
I
right
don't
now?
have there's been no explanation
They're
by
pretty
anybody
close.
for it or that makes sense other than Bruce Bochy saying we expand a little bit, we chase. It's got to stop. There's no way around it. I want to point out two stats here, right? On Garcia, okay, Adolis at this point in time last year was chasing at 36%, okay, outside the zone, 36%. This year he's at 45%. Now it's an increase of 9 percentage points. That's a 25% increase in chase. And that's not the worst. You go to Leody Taveras, who was chasing at 28% last year, or 29% last year at this point. He's chasing at 38. That's a 33% increase. And still not the worst. Because if you go to first base, where they had Nate Lowe last year, and the one thing that Nate had was a very disciplined approach, and he didn't hit for a ton of power, and that was one thing the Rangers missed. And he, they would have liked for him to be a little bit better against left-handed pitchers, but he didn't chase. Berger is chasing at 36% compared to Lowe at 24% last year. That's a 50% increase. So all of a sudden, you take a 30-year lineup that's at 25% or more increases in chase rates, and it just, it absolutely short circuits your ability to have big innings.
So David just asked if they're the lowest scoring team in the league. They are among the lowest scoring teams in the league.
I believe they've scored the fewest runs in Major League Baseball. They had before their 5-run or their 5-run weekend in San Francisco or whatever it was. But yeah, they are the lowest scoring team. It's the lowest scoring. I think it's the lowest scoring 28 game stretch to start a season in club history too.
All right, so let's look at this. Before while we were still in spring training, I sat down with Chris Young, and he said a lot of things. And one of the things he said was he was not going to put up with the same kind of start to the season like they had last year when they got themselves in a hole. They are winning more games now than they won last year, but that's primarily because of their pitching. Chris intimated to me that he was simply not going to put up with a bad start. He did not elaborate on what that meant. If that meant that people were going to get fired, people were going to get traded, whatever that means. You did get a response from him the other day. It was a text response, which kind of tells you that, he didn't want to say too much at that time. He did indicate, however, that, it's across the board. It's not just one or two guys, which I would agree with that. It is pretty much across the board, the offensive problem. So what do you think that means, Evan? What do you think that portends for this lineup, for the coaching staff, whatever?
Well, look, I mean, the question I've had on social media over and over and over again is fire the hitting coaches, fire the hitting coaches. Why don't they fire the hitting coaches? I will point out that Donnie Ecker was the hitting coach in 2023 when this offense went bonkers. It has been a season and a month that this team has struggled offensively. And I think when Chris Young says, he puts the blame on everybody, that he's certainly not going to say, hey, I'm looking directly at the hitting coaches. But rational thinking makes you believe if lineup changes don't work, and there's not a lot of personnel changes that they can make, though I do think that they're going to go back to Evan Carter in center field sooner rather than later. And I think we've probably seen the last days of Leody Taveras as a starter. That's about the only drastic personnel change they can make. After that, then you get into the whole narrative of, do you need another voice? Do you need to change the messaging? And there's part of that, to your point, that Chris Young said he's not going to stand for the same kind of start that they had last year. At this point, they are at 15-14 as we record this, the exact same record that they had after 29 games last year. But the other part is, you're at that point, you're just trying things. You're just hoping that a message gets through. I don't know that there's a definitive fix there. The definitive fix is that these guys need to stop chasing as much as they are, and just trust themselves a little bit. And I don't know how you get that across to them at this point.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of changing hitting coaches in the middle of the season. Not in a season where the West is so winnable, and the idea of right in the middle of the season, now we're going to have a completely different message coming from the hitting coaches, unless it's somebody they already knew, it's somebody in the system they could bring up that they trusted to do that. That's possible then, but that is just seems like a disaster waiting to happen.
But let me just add this to that, right? They hired Justin Veal as their hitting coach. Donnie's title is offensive coordinator. They hired Justin Veal from the Giants who was the sitting hitting coach there, as their hitting coach. Justin and Donnie worked together in San Francisco. They were a team in San Francisco before he came over here. And my point is that they kind of doubled down on this offense and this philosophy this winter. I don't view Bruce Bochy as the kind of manager who's very high on making in-season changes to his coaching staff. I think he largely believes, look, these are big league players and they need to figure out how to get it done. And so I think if you do all of that, again, these are drastic measures. I will say this. In 2011, the Rangers changed hitting coaches 3 months into the season. They had hired Thad Bosley as their hitting coach after Clint Hurdle left to take over the managerial job with the Pirates, and they fired him when they didn't think their offense was working and the message wasn't good. So it happens. The Rockies have already fired their hitting coach and brought Clint Hurdle back to be their hitting coach. So there's less. I think there's less leeway for coaches and for players, obviously, than ever before. But I think this here really, it falls on some of these players to simply have a little bit more self-awareness of the situation and pick a lane, man. Pick a lane, look for a pitch in that lane and swing at it. Simplify it. And maybe that's the one thing in the message that needs to be changed, is to simplify it just a little bit. I don't know if I'm not in these hitters meetings, but I think, look, you can start getting a lot of thoughts running around in your head, and you don't want that at the plate.
My problem, though, with comparing it to 2011 is it's a completely different game now. I mean, back then, the hitting coach, was it just somebody who kind of make you feel good about what you're doing and kind of work with you a little bit? Now there's so many metrics that are involved and so many messages sent out there already that it just seems like you're taking something that is it's like you're walking into the computer room and you're taking out a complete computer, and now we're going to plug in another one, and it's like, man, I don't know that can work in the middle of the season anymore. And the Rockies suck. So I mean, whatever they do,
I mean,
fine.
this is the guy who sets the offensive approach, right, David? This is in his title, because Donnie's a big football guy, is offensive coordinator. How many teams fire coordinators in season in the NFL?
It's rare. You started to see a little more now. Teams are becoming more reactionary early, but it still goes against the grain. And the issue is, too, if you change, I mean, you went through the whole offseason saying this is the way we're going to approach it. And now you get off to a slow start and you go, okay, we're going to do it this way now. That doesn't exactly instill confidence in the team overall that you know what direction you want and what you're doing.
Well, I think, and in your point, Evan, about bringing Evan Carter back, and look, he has been playing much better than he was in the spring. He was awful in the spring. He just looked completely lost. And so, but of course, he's still going to have this back issue that he has to manage. And how much difference is that going to make? They have had players, do better here and there, but it is, it does raise the question to me of was this a failed rehaul or overhaul of the roster? Because if we look at it, it's like you said, I was fine with changing out Nate Lowe for Jake Berger because of that. I like the fact that Berger gave him more pop. But it's a great point you make. He was the one of the two or three guys in the lineup who did have a good approach. to every at bat, and that's what's the kind of thing that kind of bugged you in the end was he would take that outside pitch and poke it into left field, and you're kind of wanting a little bit more from your first baseman than that, but that's the kind of approach that they need from more guys on this team, and
Absolutely.
and it's just not and it's not been working. So, yeah, I'm with you. It is kind of one of those things where it probably does fall back on the rest of the lineup to pick it up at some point. But if you got a chance to make a trade at some point for somebody in this lineup, maybe Jock Peterson is done, and maybe it's time to make a move for somebody who's going to give you more at that position. Would they be willing to eat Peterson's contract? It's got a 2-year deal. Would they be willing to eat that and start over at DH?
I mean, if they do, that's going to put them definitively taking on any amount of payroll is going to definitively put them over the luxury tax threshold and would defeat whatever their strategy was this winter in putting this roster together. So I think their hands are a little bit tied at the moment with what they could do personnel change wise. They've brought Dustin Harris up. Most of his at bats have been pretty good and pretty disciplined. They've got Carter in the minor leagues. Alejandro Osuna is playing every day and has had a really good stretch after a slow start the first week. I think if the Rangers are looking for changes personnel wise, it's going to come internally.
That's interesting to me. I will go back to the Leody Taveras thing.
I mean, maybe Ray Davis's approach will change, saying, "Look, we've invested this much money. We can't afford to stop now." But if that's the case, they should have had that approach this offseason when they could have really added more depth to this entire lineup and roster.
Well, absolutely, no question about that. As I was going to say with the Leody Taveras thing, I wish they had traded him after the World Series year when he was at a high. I just felt like that was as good as Leody was going to be. And what do I know? But I was right about that. I think that was his career high. He's never going to be better than that. He's just always going to be disappointing in this lineup. But it is if it comes down to that, and this division is so winnable this year, and if they don't win it with the pitching that they've gotten so far, if that is that they can't sustain that and they can't win because of their offense, well, this will be one of the most disappointing seasons that they've had in the last 20 years. Because when you have a chance to win it like they do, and they're not going to be able to take advantage of that, you'd rather just see them be bad. Than
I mean, I
do that.
I can't argue with that. The only thing I would say is probably 2012 will go down as a huge disappointment because of the collapse and coming off a back-to-back World Series. But Kevin, to your point, it's not just that this division is winnable. This league is winnable. The American League is very winnable, and I still think that the Rangers roster is capable of producing runs. What's got to change is there has got to be a smarter approach at the plate. There's just no other way to say it. They're chasing way too many pitches that aren't close to being strikes in counts where they don't have to chase.
Yeah, it's maddening to watch. There's no question about that. All right, that's going to do it for the Rangers segment of our podcast. We're going to move over now to a little potpourri. In David's last podcast, we're going to do potpourri because he loves potpourri.
I love potpourri.
Much. Yeah, he does.
Can we bring in our expert Skates Sherrington to talk about the ice, the hockey?
We're going to talk a little hockey here to get things started off. The Stars had a big win over the Avalanche as we're taping this on Tuesday, on Monday night. That was very impressive. When they got out to the 3-0 lead. Well, they scored 9 seconds into the game, which is a Stars record for a playoff game to score that quickly. Wyatt Johnston scored. And then they erupt 3-0. And then in the second period, late in the period, the Avalanche come back with 2 quick goals, pop, and it's 3-2. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, there was no way they were going to blow this. And then they come back and score 2 more goals and end up winning in the third period, and end up winning 6-2. So a very impressive win for the Stars. And in that situation when the series is tied 2-2 and you go up 3-2, that is a massive win because as Leah Simakopoulos pointed out in her 5 thoughts today, if the teams that are up 3-2 go on to win 79% of the time, that's just such a tough thing to come back from, to know you have to win 2 straight games, which the Stars have done in this series, but it's still difficult to do.
Well, and significant too, because even though the series was 2-2, the Stars had led only like a couple of minutes for the entire series.
I think just a little over a minute, actually.
Yeah.
For the entire, they won both of those games in overtime.
And then to score 9 seconds in like that just completely changed the tone at home. You clearly saw them build after that. But again, you also saw a 2-0 lead against the Avalanche is never really safe. They're an outstanding offensive team.
They are very good offensively, and they showed that when they came back, because really the goals they scored on when they broke back into the game were pretty phenomenal.
Yeah,
pretty
they were.
phenomenal. Examples like the Stars when they came back, there was some very good, very nifty passing and good play, but not like not situations where like the scorer just kind of dominated the guy who was trying to keep up with him, and that's what the Avs do so well. So I think what we're starting to see now is that Jake Oettinger, who was of the 2 goalies, was the one who had, I think he'd started 47 playoff games coming into this playoffs, and meanwhile Mackenzie Blackwood it was his first playoff series, and I think we're starting to see that now that Ottinger's advantage experience is maybe coming into play here a little bit. So we'll see how they do going out of this. Now they'll go up to Colorado to play on Thursday and see if they can close that out there. I picked the Stars to lose this series just because the Avalanche were so good. They're so good offensively. If they can get out of this series and then maybe they end up playing the Jets, which it's like how is this possible that you would play two opening series that are against teams that were so good. So we'll see how they do coming out of this. They need to probably refigure how they do the playoffs and the seedings in the NHL. It's not really fair the way this works out. But the Stars are certainly capable of moving on and winning it all, frankly. Also, we had this week the Nelson is going on. The CJ Cup Byron Nelson is what that's called now. We're going to get the official title in there. We don't ever pay attention to official titles around here, though. But that's going to be up at Craig Ranch. They have remodeled Craig Ranch. After this podcast is over, as a matter of fact, I'm going to wander up there with me and Brad Townsend and take a look at some of the stuff they've done up there to lengthen the course a little bit, make it a little tougher. One of the reasons why, some of the tour players have not come out and it doesn't have a great field. They got 7 top 50 players, same as they did last year. It's just too easy. It's a par 71 course. 2 years ago, it was the second easiest par 71 course. Last year, it was the easiest par 71 course on the tour. So they got Lanny Watkins out there to try to toughen it up a little bit, lengthen it at least. Then after the tournament this year, they're going to completely resurface it. That new Tiff Tough turf.
They're going to resurface the golf course?
Resurface the golf course.
What are they going to
taking
do?
out
Put
all
down
the grass?
pavement?
Yeah, they're going to put pavement on it.
Artificial
they're going to put
turf?
hardwoods. They're putting hardwoods in. Going to make it a little faster. So anyway, we were looking at the fact that the Lakers are struggling a little bit. Luka Doncic got a stomach bug in Game 3. Couldn't guard anybody. I guess that's what Nico Harrison complained about all along, right? Can't guard anybody. Might have had something to do with the fact that
he does a few other things, though.
He does a couple of other things. Yeah, pretty good otherwise. Only had 17 points in Game 3 in that loss, and he came back in Game 4 and was much better. But Anthony Edwards is really feeling it now. Unlike the playoffs last year when the Mavericks went up there and really silenced him. We remember him talking about the fact that he's over on the bench getting oxygen, and he just really flamed out in that series. I think he really showed his inexperience in those playoffs. But boy, he has really answered the bell here in these playoffs.
Yeah, he's been outstanding. And watching the Lakers in this series, it reminds me a little bit of after the Mavericks got Kyrie Irving, and you saw that Luka and Kyrie just didn't have enough time to play together on the court to be in sync. Where if you go back to that year, what were people talking about? Oh, well, you either had like Luka was on and Kyrie watched, or Kyrie was on and Luka kind of stood off to the side. It wasn't like they were complimenting and playing off of each other's games. I think you see that right now with LeBron and Luka. It's like one of them gets going, and the other, it just takes away too much from who they are. And if LeBron's the one going, Luka finds himself in that same position. So I think it's this is just they haven't played together long enough. They're probably too differential to each other, just like Kyrie and Luka were when that first started. I think you address this over time. It's but they just haven't had enough time, and Minnesota's capitalizing on that.
That's been my one complaint about LeBron in his career. I think he's just too deferential. Just what you said. If we look at the greatest players ever, and obviously LeBron is in that conversation, all of them wanted the ball. Kobe Bryant wanted the ball. Michael Jordan wanted the ball. They were not deferential in those situations, and I think that their teammates counted on that. I think that this will be difficult, I think, for the Lakers a little bit. I mean, David, how much longer do you think that LeBron's going to want to play? How much longer are they going to be able to count on them growing into some kind of working teammates?
I would think another year or two. I mean, I don't think they, look, he loves Luka and what he can bring, and I think I think there's an element of LeBron that acknowledges, you know what, I will be passing the torch, and what better way than to pass it to this guy who's my teammate. So I think he's driven by that, and I look, he's still playing at a very high level. I think it's just they just haven't had enough time to one to figure out their roles. Two, that's basically only about a 3-man team. They really need to, flesh it out this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, that was the whole thing. The reason that, that Anthony Davis was upset they didn't have a center, and he was having to play center. Well, now without him, they really didn't have. Jackson Hayes is not the answer there. So, yeah. Austin Reeves has emerged as a number 3 guy, but I really think that the Mavericks with Luka were a better team than the Lakers.
Oh, yeah. No question. Yeah.
And so, Luka has left an environment where they kind of put the kind of players around him that he needed to have around him, whether Nico Harrison thought that or not. And now he's gone to a place where you're playing with one of the greatest ever. And then Austin Reeves is a really nice, player as well, but there's just nothing outside of that. No. So they're going to really have to do some reconfiguring. And this is the best thing that could have happened for Nico Harrison, because if the Lakers had somehow put it all together and marched through these playoffs and gone to the final, I'm not sure even then that Nico could have come back. I think that I have said all along that you got to at least give Nico another season here to see if this can work out, this great experiment that he has taken on. But if that would have happened, and I didn't think it was going to happen, but if that would have happened, the Lakers had done that, it would have just been an untenable situation here for Nico.
Yeah, I think the assault's going to abate a bit with if the Lakers do go out here, especially if they go out a pretty easy out the way it looks right now. We'll see what happens.
I think it does look like an easy out to me. All right, speaking of easy outs, David, we want to give you this opportunity now in the couple of minutes that we have left to say whatever it is you want to say about the morning news. You can say it now, and it won't cost you your job. Because you've already done your exit interview, and it's all.
But
done.
I need to get my final check, so I think we need to keep that in mind.
Oh, David, in your long career, was there anything that you would have wanted to cover that you never did get to do?
Well, I would have liked to have done some more Olympics.
Yeah.
I never did a Masters. I would have loved to have done a Masters. Done a U.S. Open, did a PGA, not a Masters. That would have been great. But I guess on ending it, it's I've had some people go, well, why now? Um, you know, my timing's always been impeccable. I mean, my day-to-day coverage of the Cowboys was sandwiched between their 5 championships. I did cover the Mavericks title run when they won the title, but I wasn't the NBA writer of the day-to-day. At that point, I was actually doing the Cowboys and just swung over. So as I said, my timing's always been impeccable. So I just decided now, with the market so strong and all of the economic indicators looking so good, this was the time to step away.
Yeah, that's right. Cash in that 401k now. There you go. Good thinking on your part. Well,
Thank you.
yeah, we're not going to hold that against you that didn't happen. I don't think though this means that the Cowboys are going to win it all next year, David. I don't know. I will say I was there for the other day when Jerry Jones came in and gave you a very heartfelt toast. I thought this was classic Jerry to me. Is that I know people think that I don't like him or even hate him. First of all, I don't hate anybody, and for everything that Jerry has done, it's nothing personal to me. It's his football
No.
team, and you can't help but like him. To me, he's a lot like Barry Switzer, who was in his own way a scoundrel and did a lot of things that weren't so good. And that's the same thing you could probably say about Jerry Jones. But they're impossible not to like. They try so hard to to get along with everybody, and Barry's more likable to me than Jerry is, because I do think that Barry is very sincere about all of that. But I was struck by what Jerry said to you, and I thought it was very nice. I wonder what you thought when you were done with that.
No, I was touched by it. I really was. It was very meaningful. Wasn't aware that was going to happen. Somebody said, "Guy, he talked for almost like 7 minutes about you." And I said, "Well, you got to understand, a Jerry burp takes about 4 to 5 minutes. So I mean, he's that's not really all that long in Jerry time." But
This is true.
I didn't know until Tad Carper, the PR director, walked up right as the 4 of them were walking in and said, "Don't ask any questions. Jerry has a few comments first." So then that was the first time I got a sense something was up. But since Jerry was so nice to me, let's kind of end this, and I'll say that it's very interesting. So many people come up to me and go, "What is Jerry Jones like?" And before I can utter a word, they proceed to tell me what they don't like about him, what infuriates them. How could he do this? What about that? So I listen and nod, and I say, I understand. I agree with all of that. All I can tell you is this. If you spent 10 minutes in a room with Jerry Jones, you would walk away. It wouldn't change your opinion of how he runs the team or the mistakes he's made. But after that 10 minutes, you would walk away and say, I kind of like the guy.
No, it's impossible not to. I agree 100%. I've told the story about the time that, I introduced my wife Debbie to him, and and told him that he was from Arkansas, and he looked at her and said, "Can you talk to this guy about taking it easy on me a little bit?" It's just that kind of thing. It's impossible not to like it. Now, I will say this one last thing, David. You have always been the Bella Abzug of the Cowboys press conferences. Always ask the first question. So who gets
Helen
that honor
Thomas?
now?
I think actually
Bella
Helen
Abzug
Thomas
was a congresswoman from New York.
Helen Thomas is
Helen
what you're
Thomas.
thinking
That's what
of.
it was. Well, it was close. I was close. Maybe
They were close in age, I guess.
You're right.
In what way were you close?
Well, they were both women. So anyway, Helen, you were the Helen Thomas at the Bella Abzug. You might have been the Bella Abzug of the Cowboys press conference too. But anyway, you were the Helen Thomas. So does that mean Clarence Hill is going to ask the first question now?
That's to be determined. We'll see. I know that Clarence Hill is lobbying for it. I don't know if it will turn out that way. We'll see.
Oh man, I tell
It's
you,
nothing I lobbied for either. It just kind of happened. So
Well,
we'll
I'd
see
say
how it
this.
unfolds.
It's always been, every time I go out there, it's like a junior high locker room. So without David Moore to class up the joint, it's just going to get even worse. So I don't look forward to that. So on this last podcast for David Moore, we wish him all the best. He's meant a lot to us and meant a lot to the paper and to us personally. We're sorry to see him go, but we're happy to see him go out on top, as he said. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.